Sir, you have to leave now. The new Waitress stopped a CEO moments before a $100 million deal. What if the person who saved your life was someone you'd never met before? Someone who had every reason to stay silent. In the heart of Manhattan, inside one of its most exclusive restaurants, 42-year-old James Chen adjusted his silk tie. This was it. The meeting that would redefine his entire career. In his briefcase were the documents for a $100 million merger. The culmination of 15 years of relentless work, transforming his tech company from a garage startup into a global giant. The rival CEO was due any minute to finalize the deal that would secure both of their legacies. James had prepared for every possible outcome, every question, every negotiation tactic. What he couldn't have predicted was the young woman in a server's apron who was about to approach his table with trembling hands and whisper the words that would shatter his perfect evening. Her name tag read, Lucy, and her eyes held a secret that was about to save his life. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Lucy Martinez had only been working at the prestigious Le Bernardin for 3 weeks. At 34, she felt like an imposter among the polished, seasoned staff. But after her husband's accident left their family drowning in medical bills, she desperately needed this job. The elegant dining room, with its soft lighting and hushed conversations of New York's elite, was intimidating, but she was determined to succeed. Tonight was different, though. The maitre d' had assigned her to Section 7, reserved for the most important guests. No mistakes tonight, he'd said, and Lucy nodded, her hands still shaking slightly as she carried the heavy trays. Then, she saw him. James Chen walked in with the unmistakable confidence of a man who belonged anywhere he went. Lucy recognized him from business magazines she'd read in hospital waiting rooms. The tech mogul who'd revolutionized cloud computing before he was even 40. As she arranged the bread service at his table, she overheard a fragment of his phone call. "The contracts are ironclad," he said. "By midnight, we'll have sealed the biggest deal in both our companies' histories." He smiled, ending the call, completely unaware that Lucy had frozen beside him. The company he'd mentioned, Harrison Tech Industries, sent a chill down her spine. 6 months ago, that same company had laid off her husband, David, just before his diagnosis, cutting off his health insurance when they needed it most. She remembered the executives smiling on the news, talking about restructuring for efficiency, while her own family's world crumbled. A surge of old anger and pain washed over her. David's confused face as security escorted him out, the mountain of medical bills, the nights she held him while he apologized for getting sick. It all came flooding back. But tonight wasn't about her pain. Tonight, she had overheard something that could destroy James Chen's perfect plan. And despite the history, despite the resentment she felt, she couldn't let that happen. Because the rival CEO he was waiting for had a reputation for last-minute betrayals, and Lucy had just learned something that could save James from making the biggest mistake of his life. For the next hour, Lucy watched James, her heart racing. She refilled his water glass, her hands now surprisingly steady as her mind wrestled with an impossible choice. She had seen Robert Harrison's assistant, the rival CEO's right-hand man, making hushed phone calls near the restroom. She'd caught phrases like backup buyers and switching at the last minute. The restaurant hummed along, but for Lucy, time was slowing down. James sat alone, occasionally glancing at his watch, completely trusting that his business partner would honor their agreement. On her break, Lucy stepped into the cool October air of the alley behind the restaurant. She pulled out her phone and frantically searched for news about Harrison Tech. A pattern quickly emerged: acquire smaller companies, strip them for parts, and leave hundreds unemployed. Her husband David's story wasn't an isolated incident. It was their business model. She thought of David at home, probably asleep in his recliner, surrounded by medical journals, studying to find new ways to contribute despite his limitations. His courage humbled her. She knew he would want her to do the right thing, even for a stranger who represented the very system that had hurt them. Back in the dining room, James checked his phone again. A flicker of doubt crossed his face as his meeting ran late. Lucy noticed him touching his wedding ring, a small, humanizing gesture. Maybe he also had someone at home who believed in him, someone whose world would shatter if this deal went wrong. For months, Lucy had felt powerless, but tonight, she held the power to prevent someone else from feeling that same devastation. If this story is touching your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. The clock struck 9:30. Lucy made her decision. She smoothed her apron, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked towards James Chen's table, knowing that the next few moments would change both of their lives forever. "Sir?" Her voice was barely a whisper as she approached his table. Her heart pounded. What was she, a waitress drowning in debt interrupting a billionaire's evening? James looked up from his phone, his expression polite but distant. "Yes? Is there something you need?" Lucy glanced around, making sure no one could overhear. She knelt beside his chair. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she began, her voice urgent but controlled. "But I think you're about to be betrayed." The words tumbled out. James's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I beg your pardon?" "Mr. Harrison," she said, looking him directly in the eye, "he isn't coming to honor your deal." The story doesn't end here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2, where we find out what happens next. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. They're planning to leave you stranded and sell to someone else. I heard his assistant making calls about backup buyers, about pulling out at the last minute. James stared at her, his mind struggling to process the information. "You're telling me that Robert Harrison, a man I've known for 10 years, is planning to double-cross me, based on something you overheard?" The skepticism in his voice cut deep, but Lucy understood. To him, she was a nobody, just another face in the service industry that powerful men like him barely noticed. "I know how this sounds," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but that company, Harrison Tech, it destroyed my husband's life. I've learned to recognize their patterns. They did the same thing to 3 other firms this year." Something in her tone, a raw, painful honesty, made James lean forward. "What happened to your husband?" Lucy's voice grew quiet, heavy with memory. "Harrison Tech laid him off right before he was diagnosed with a chronic illness. They cut his health insurance and left us with nothing." She paused, seeing a flicker of recognition in James's eyes. "I don't want that to happen to you. Even though we're strangers, even though your world and mine couldn't be more different." For the first time that evening, James truly looked at her. He saw not a server, but a person carrying her own weight of worry and hope. He noticed the exhaustion around her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands, and the immense strength it must have taken to approach him. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly. "Because everyone deserves a fighting chance," Lucy replied, her gaze unwavering. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest." Have you ever been in a situation where a stranger's advice changed everything? Let us know your story in the comments below. James glanced at his phone. 9:45 p.m. Harrison was now 15 minutes late, which was highly unusual for a man who prided himself on punctuality. Suddenly, Lucy's warning felt less like a wild accusation and more like a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. Just then, his phone buzzed. A text message. "Running late. Start without me. Harrison." The casual words, which would normally seem courteous, now felt calculated and cold. Lucy watched his expression change as the pieces clicked into place. "He's never late," James murmured, more to himself than to her. In 10 years of business, Robert has never been late to anything important. He looked up at her, a newfound respect in his eyes. "How did you know?" Lucy pulled out her own phone and showed him a collection of news articles she had bookmarked. "Harrison Tech has a history of this," she explained. "They string companies along, convince them to reject other offers, and then pull out at the last second when the target is most vulnerable. It's not personal to them. It's just business." James scrolled through the articles, his face growing darker with each headline. He read stories of companies that had trusted Harrison, of families torn apart by sudden layoffs, of executives who lost everything because they believed in a handshake agreement. "My God," he whispered. "I turned down 3 other offers because Robert assured me we had a solid deal." "You still have time," Lucy said gently. "It's not even 10 while." Those other buyers might still be interested. For a moment, James sat in stunned silence, the reality of how close he'd come to losing everything washing over him. His company, his employees' jobs, his family's security, all of it had hung in the balance while he waited for a friend who was planning his betrayal. "I need to make some calls," he said, standing abruptly. He paused, looking at Lucy again, truly seeing her this time. "Why? Why did you save me? After what they did to your husband, you had every reason to let me fall." Lucy straightened her apron, and for the first time that evening, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Because becoming bitter doesn't heal anything. Because kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away. My husband taught me that, even after everything he's been through." A warmth spread through James's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years of cutthroat business dealings. "What's your name?" "Lucy Martinez." "Lucy Martinez," he repeated. "You just saved my company and probably my marriage. How can I ever repay you?" She was already stepping back towards the bustling kitchen. "Just pay it forward someday. Help someone else when they need it most." If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As Lucy disappeared, James pulled out his phone and started making the calls that would salvage his future. But even as he negotiated new deals, he couldn't stop thinking about the waitress who had risked her job to save a stranger. 3 months later, Lucy was arranging flowers in the lobby of the David Martinez Medical Research Foundation when she heard familiar footsteps. She turned to find James Chen, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He held a large envelope and wore a genuine smile. "Hello, Lucy." "Mr. Chen." She wiped her hands on her jeans, suddenly conscious of her casual attire. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to see the foundation David started with the grant we provided," he said, handing her the envelope. "And I wanted to thank you properly. The preliminary research your husband's team published last month has already attracted 3 major pharmaceutical companies. They want to fund clinical trials." Lucy's eyes filled with tears as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check that would cover David's medical expenses for the next 5 years, along with a letter offering him a position as chief researcher at James's new medical technology division. "The company that tried to destroy you," James said softly, "ended up helping create something beautiful. Harrison Tech went bankrupt 2 weeks ago. Turns out betraying partners isn't a sustainable business model. But David's research, it's going to help thousands." "James, we can't accept this much." "Yes, you can. And you will," he said, his voice carrying the same authority she'd heard that night but now wrapped in warmth. "That evening you taught me that real wealth isn't measured in deals or acquisitions. It's measured in the lives we touch and the good we do when no one is watching." Lucy walked him through the foundation's small but growing facility. They paused at David's office where he was deep in conversation with a team of young researchers, his face animated with the passion that had first made her fall in love with him. "He looks happy," James observed. "He is, we both are," Lucy replied. "For the first time in years, we're not just surviving. We're building something meaningful." She turned to face him. "You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," James insisted. "You saved my company, but more importantly, you saved my soul. I'd forgotten that business could be about more than just profit margins. You reminded me that behind every decision are real people with real lives." As they walked back to the lobby, James paused at the foundation's mission statement etched in marble. "Healing begins when kindness meets courage." "David wrote that," Lucy said proudly. "It's perfect," James replied. "And it's exactly what you showed me." He extended his hand for a shake, then thought better of it and pulled her into a warm hug. "Thank you, Lucy Martinez. Thank you for choosing kindness." As James left, Lucy stood in the afternoon sunlight. Sometimes the smallest act of courage can create the biggest change. Sometimes a whispered warning becomes a foundation for hope. And sometimes choosing kindness over bitterness doesn't just heal one heart, it can heal 2. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe for more tales like this one. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you never know when your next act of kindness might change someone's world.